Volkov knew something you don't, and the heating industry has spent 40 years making sure it stays that way. He wasn't a survivalist. He wasn't a prepper. He was a 57-year-old petroleum engineer from Anchorage with a bad severance package, a truck with 200,000 miles on it, and the kind of stubbornness that passes for wisdom once enough time has gone by. When he bought the property outside Delta Junction 40 acres, Boreal Forest, a corrugated steel arch from 1971 sitting half buried in frozen ground, his former colleagues thought he had broken something inside himself. What he had actually done was find a loophole, the one that's been sitting in plain sight since the Second World War, the one that smart Alaskans have been quietly exploiting while everyone else writes monthly checks to the oil company. The loophole is a Quonset, and before you dismiss it, you need to understand something. This structure was not designed to be cheap. It was designed to be indestructible. The U.S. Navy commissioned the first one in 1941 because they needed a building that could be shipped anywhere on Earth, assembled by unskilled labor in a single afternoon, and still be standing after a Pacific typhoon. They got exactly what they asked for. And then the war ended, and the military sold them off by the thousands, and they scattered across the American landscape like seeds, and most people forgot what they actually were. That forgetting is exactly what makes them valuable right now. Here is what you're not being told. The modern housing industry, insulation manufacturers, HVAC distributors, propane suppliers, the whole interconnected apparatus, has a financial interest in you believing that heating a home in extreme cold is a complex, expensive, professional-grade problem that requires their products and their service contracts and their annual maintenance visits. They are not lying to you, but they are not telling you the whole truth either. Because the whole truth includes the fact that a 50-year-old steel arch, properly understood and properly modified, can heat itself for free on a clear winter day. Volkov proved it. He measured it. He lived inside the proof for 6 consecutive winters. He will tell you the first winter was an education in humility. He ran out of heat at 2 a.m. on December 15th, minus 31 outside, wood stove burning low, lie in 3 sleeping bags listening to the steel shell crack and contract above him like rifle shots. He had done everything wrong. Wrong with species, wrong stacking method, wrong assumptions about BTU output relative to cubic footage. He survived. More importantly, he paid attention. That is the entire secret. If there is one, he paid attention. What he learned in the second half of that first winter, reading university extension papers on his phone at the Delta Junction Public Library and buying used thermal engineering books through the mail, is something that should be taught in every building trade program in cold climate states and isn't. The secret is this. The Quonset steel shell is not the building. It was never the building. It is the armor. The building is what you construct inside it. Think about that for a moment, because it inverts everything you have been told about insulation and construction. Most people, when they look at corrugated steel arch, see the thermal problem first. Steel conducts heat 50 times faster than wood. A bare Quonset in an Alaskan winter is essentially a radiator running in reverse, pulling every BTU you generate and pushing it straight out into the cold. That part is true. What they miss, what the industry wants you to miss, because understanding it makes you their worst nightmare as a customer, is that the steel shell, precisely because it is so thin and so conductive, also sheds weather instantly. Rain beads off it. Snow slides off the curve without accumulating. Wind finds nothing to grip. It is simultaneously the worst insulator and the best weather barrier you can buy. And if you understand that distinction, everything else follows. Volkov built his actual thermal envelope inside the shell. Interior wall framing, 2x6 studs, set a deliberate air gap back from the steel. That gap alone does something the insulation manufacturers would rather not discuss in their advertising. It breaks the conductive path. Warm interior air cannot touch the cold steel directly. Then he packed the stud bays with dense pack cellulose. Not fiberglass bats, not open cell spray foam, dense pack cellulose, which has an R value per inch that beats fiberglass by 15%, and which, critically, does not sag or settle in a curved cavity over time. R 23 in the walls. Then rigid foam bored inward of the cellulose. R 38 total wall assembly. Then a ceiling dropped below the apex of the arch. creating a dead air attic that buffers the living space from the roof above. He did all of this himself, over 2 summers, with lumber from the local yard and salvage materials from 3 different demolition sites. Total materials cost $4,200. Heating bill reduction, roughly 70% compared to his Anchorage house, which had cost him $12,000 a year to keep warm. You are not hearing those numbers from the insulation manufacturer's website. You should ask yourself why. The Arch is doing something else for you that nobody in the new construction industry will bother to mention, because they cannot sell to you and therefore does not exist in their literature. A curved roof under snow load behaves completely differently from a peaked roof under snow load. On a conventional gabled structure, snow accumulates. It sits. It compresses. It adds weight at the ridge and at the eave simultaneously, and when it gets heavy enough, something gives. Volkov has a neighbor 3 miles down the road with a code-built stick-frame barn constructed in 2009, a perfectly normal building, properly permitted and inspected. That barn has partially collapsed under snow load twice in 8 years. Volkov has never touched a snow rake. He does not own one. The curve of the Quonset roof sheds snow continuously, distributing load outward along the panel seams and letting gravity do the maintenance. In a place where a single storm can drop 4 feet of wet snow in 36 hours, this is not a convenience. It is the difference between a building that survives and one that doesn't. Now here is the part that sounds like a claim being made up for a video. It is not. Volkov removed the original south-facing end wall of the Quonset in his second summer on the property and replaced it with a framed assembly of his own design. In that new end wall, he installed 4 large double-pane windows, salvaged from a school demolition in Fairbanks, hauled back in the truck bed across 2 trips. Total cost, including fuel, $310. Those windows face almost precisely due south. In December, when the sun hangs low on the Alaskan horizon for 6 hours before giving up and going back down, it drives through those windows at a low angle and hits a brick wall. That brick wall is the key. Volkov built it inside the Quonset from reclaimed material. Bricks pulled from a collapsed chimney on a property 2 towns over, hauled back in buckets, stacked and moored himself over the course of 3 weekends. 8 inches thick, 4 feet wide, floor to ceiling. It sits in the direct path of the winter sun, coming through the south glazing. Brick has a specific heat capacity of approximately 0.84 kilojoules per kilogram per degree Celsius. It absorbs solar energy slowly and releases it slowly. By 3 in the afternoon on a clear December day, that wall is warm to the touch. By 9 in the evening, when the sun went down 6 hours ago and the temperature outside has dropped to minus 28, that wall is still radiating usable heat into the living space. Volkov has measured it with an infrared thermometer every clear December afternoon for 5 years. Peak surface temperature, 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Heat retention to midnight, consistent. He does not run the wood stove on clear December days. He has not needed to since the 3rd winter. That is the free heat loophole. It is not a product. It is not a system. It is orientation plus mass plus glass, and it is based on principles that the ancient Romans understood and that every modern HVAC sales representative has a financial interest in making you believe are too complicated to implement without their assistance. They are not too complicated. Volkov implemented them in a borrowed weekend with 4 salvage windows and $300 worth of used brick. Let's talk about the other thing the industry doesn't want you thinking about, which is complexity as a business model. Volkov has visited 2 off-grid homes built from scratch by men who spent more than $200,000 on the project. Timber frames, architect-designed passive solar orientations, triple-pane windows shipped from manufacturers in the lower 48. Radiant floor heating running on propane systems with digital controllers and zone valves and pressure sensors that require annual calibration. Beautiful homes, genuinely beautiful, and fragile in a way that a half-buried steel arch from 1971 simply is not. At one of those homes, the radiant floor controller board failed in January. The owner spent 11 days in a hotel in Fairbanks waiting for a replacement board to arrive from a warehouse in Oregon. 11 days at his own house, because the building could not function without a proprietary electronic component manufactured by one company and available only through their service network. Volkov's wood stove is a Jotul F602. He bought it used in 2019 for $220 from a man in talk who is upgrading. It has two moving parts that matter, a damper rod and a door latch. Both can be fabricated from materials available at any hardware store in the state of Alaska. He has never needed to fabricate either one, but he could today in an afternoon. That is the entire philosophy of the Quonset approach distilled into a single cast iron box. Here is the full picture of what Volkov spends in a year, because the numbers are the argument and you deserve to see them plainly. Total annual cash outlay for heat, power, and water, approximately $1,200. That includes firewood supplementation in the shoulder seasons. Generator fuel for the small Honda. He runs 2 hours a night in deep winter to top his battery bank. Propane for the 2-burner cook stove, and replacement parts for hand tools. Property taxes on 40 acres, $840. Vehicle costs, $600. He earns income doing chainsaw work and welding repair for neighbors, charges in cash, sometimes in goods. Annual income between $14,000 and $20,000, depending on the year. No debt, no mortgage, no heating oil delivery. No service contract. No monthly bill from any utility company for anything. His neighbor in the stick frame house pays $900 a month for heating oil in February. Volkov spent less than $900 on firewood for the entire previous year. That gap, that specific, measurable, repeatable gap, is what the industry has spent 4 decades obscuring with product complexity and marketing spend and the quiet cultural pressure that tells you a real home is a new home, a permitted home, a warrantied home, a home with a furnace and a service agreement, and a registered thermostat. The daily rhythm that comes with this life is something Volkov talks about less than the engineering, because it is harder to explain to people who have not experienced it. He wakes before light, checks the stove, adds what if the clear day passive gain wasn't enough to carry through the night, starts coffee on the 2-burner. The entry vestibule, a small unheated airlock he built onto the south end wall, functions as his refrigerator from October through April, maintaining between 28 and 38 degrees without a single watt of power. In summer, a 12-volt chest freezer running off a 200-watt solar panel and 2 AGM batteries handles cold storage. The solar system cost him $840 in components and took 1 day to install. It covers his power load from April through October without supplementation. He splits with 2 hours every morning that weather allows. It comes from his own land. He drops bucks hulls and splits it himself with a maul. He is not a young man. He knows that, but the work suits his body in ways that no office chair ever did, and the efficiency of the process, the direct, unambiguous connection between physical effort and thermal comfort, is something he finds clarifying in a way he cannot fully articulate and has stopped trying to. None of this is a fantasy. None of it requires particular luck or unusual skill or a background in engineering, though the background helps. What it requires is the willingness to understand the building you are living in rather than outsourcing that understanding to a service provider. The Quonset rewards that willingness specifically because it is simple enough to be fully understood by one person. There are no hidden systems. There are no proprietary components. There is a steel arch that has been tested by 50 Alaskan winters and is still standing, a wood stove with 2 moving parts, a brick wall that stores free energy from the sun, and a man who paid attention long enough to make all 3 work together. The heating industry will not tell you this. The real estate market will not tell you this. The building code apparatus, which is designed to protect the liability interests of contractors and product manufacturers as much as it is designed to protect occupants, will actively work against this. The Quonset in its raw form does not meet modern residential code in most jurisdictions. Volkov's modifications, done by hand on private land in a borough, without building inspection requirements, exist in a regulatory space that is closing steadily as rural Alaska is discovered by people with different expectations about what a legal home looks like, which is why the men who know about this move quietly. They do not post about it. They do not seek permits they don't need. They find the half-buried steel arches on acreage that nobody else wants. They pay less for the whole package than a new truck costs, and they spend 2 summers doing the intellectual and physical work of understanding what they have. And then they spend their winters warm, debt-free, and invisible to every system that would otherwise be extracting money from them on a monthly basis. Volkov stacks another row of spruce against the end wall. The sun is at its low December angle, cutting through the south glazing at 11 degrees above the horizon, hitting the brick wall dead center. By 3 this afternoon, it will be warm to the touch. By 9 tonight, it will still be giving off heat. He will not run the stove today. He has not run the stove on a clear day in 3 years. He picks up the maul. The temperature is minus 35. He is not cold.